The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are mine and the guest hosts and do not necessarily reflect those of my employer, the Walt Disney Company. And now, on to the show. Welcome to Movies Unhacked, where we travel through time to hunt down movies from 1984 and save them from the future. My name is Scott Croco. I'm joined by Matt Janilowitz. We'll be unhacking The Terminator from 1984, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, Linda Hamilton, and Michael Biehn, and written and directed by James Cameron. Hello, Matt.
Hello. How's it going?
I'm good. Are you ready to break down The Terminator?
I am ready to totally break down The Terminator.
All right.
All right, let's do it.
How many times do you think you've seen it?
Oh, gosh. Since 1984, I have to have at least seen it 20 times, probably.
Mm-hmm.
But it isn't one that I revisit on purpose very often. So probably before yesterday, it'd probably been about 8 years since I'd seen it, all the way through. Mm-hmm. It's one of those ones where you don't flip through channels much anymore, and that's probably why. You don't, when you're flipping through and there's nothing to watch and it's on, you watch it, but that's just not how we watch TV anymore, so you kind of have to purposely go watch it. But it was one of those ones when I used regular TV, we're like, oh, Terminator's on, gotta watch it.
Right, yeah. Terminator, I've probably seen, not as much as you have, I don't know, I've seen maybe 10, a dozen times, and like you, I hadn't seen it in years, and it turned out to be pretty much the way I remembered it.
Yeah, it holds up. There's parts of it that don't, but by and large, it's still really, even though it's so of its time, it's still really, really watchable now.
This is essentially James Cameron's first movie. He's credited for directing Piranha Part 2 as his first movie, but he got fired from that. He worked on it for, I think, a few weeks before he got fired. Terminator, though, he both wrote and directed. This is really his movie. And after he got the green light to make it, the studio who made Conan the Barbarian with Arnold heard that Arnold had signed on to do this movie, so they activated a clause in his contract to force him into doing the second Conan movie, and that put the Terminator on hold for, I'm not sure, it was like 7 or 8 months, I think. So in the meantime, James Cameron needed something to do and thought, well, I'll take on a writing gig of some kind. So in the time he was waiting to make Terminator, he got writing jobs for both Rambo 2 and Aliens.
Mm.
And Fox loved the Aliens script so much that they offered to let Cameron direct it if the Terminator turned out to be successful. And we all know how that happened.
Yep. It all kind of turned out for him.
It did. I don't have a good way to confirm this, but apparently every actress in Hollywood was considered for the role of Sarah Connor. And I have a list that I'm going to read to you of people who were to some degree considered. Some of them were actually offered the part. Some of them just auditioned. Some of them were, suggested by people working on the film. And this is about half of the names that I found. Kathleen Turner, Deborah Winger, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Tatum O'Neal, Melanie Griffith, Jodie Foster, Gina Davis, Glenn Close, Daryl Hannah, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Michelle Pfeiffer, Diane Lane, Carrie Fisher, Sharon Stone, Kelly McGillis, Bridget Fonda, Kate Capshaw, Susan Sarandon, Goldie Hawn, Sybil Shepherd, Jamie Lee Curtis, Terry Garr, and Madonna.
So all the blonde actresses of the day.
Yeah, and like I said, there's easily 10 more names that I did not include in that list.
Yeah. Very few of those I can picture being good in that role.
Deborah Winger seems to be the one who was the closest to actually doing it. I think she was actually offered the role and maybe even accepted it before then changing her mind, or she had scheduling conflicts maybe, but I think she was the closest to actually having the role.
Do you know, or do you think that the second Terminator was in mind when they were casting? Because that's part of what it's hard to not think about the second one when you think about Linda Hamilton and that whole transformation. And that's probably watching the Terminator again now is what makes her so good, I think, in the first one.
I don't know if Terminator 2 was in mind, but some of the things that ended up in Terminator 2 were originally envisioned for the first movie.
Mm.
James Cameron had the idea for the liquid metal opponent for the original Terminator, but was like, well, I can't make that on this budget with
Yeah.
today's technology in 1984. So that didn't happen until later. The Terminator role was also considered for a few different people. Reportedly, Mel Gibson, Lance Henriksen, Tom Selleck, O.J. Simpson, and Chevy Chase. That's what I read. I don't know. Like I said,
No Lou Ferrigno in there.
yeah, it's hard to confirm the accuracy of this stuff.
I think I might want to see that actually.
The Chevy Chase Terminator version.
I want to see how he delivers those one-liners.
Hmm.
I'm just picturing Fletch as the Terminator. Bub and Taco. I don't know.
And let's see, the Kyle Reese character also had a few people as potential candidates: Bruce Willis, Mickey Rourke, Sting, and Arnold Schwarzenegger was originally interested in playing Kyle Reese.
Hmm.
And James Cameron apparently told him that no, this movie's about the Terminator. That's the character you want to be if you're going to be in this movie. After casting Arnold, the script didn't have to change very much. The main thing that changed was that Cameron's original vision for this Terminator was that he was kind of an everyman, and he could be in the crowd and you just would never know who he was. He could just blend in.
Right.
Of course, as soon as you cast Arnold, that goes out the window because
Right.
he's noticeable everywhere he goes.
I don't know. That sounds like it would be kind of interesting, but just the way they portrayed the war of the future, I can't imagine they would bother making a robot like that. you know,
Right.
Judging by all the spaceships and all the other firepower and guns that the machines had in the future, that just seems like it would have been a weird way to go.
For the listeners who might not have seen The Terminator in a while, or who have never seen it, I'm going to run through the movie's plot.
Shame on you if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, exactly. If you haven't seen it, you definitely should go watch it right now. And spoiler warning, if you don't go watch it first, then we're about to spoil a lot of what happens in this movie. So go watch it first, then come back. Movie opens, and we've got two different guys arriving via lightning storms. They kind of pop up out of nowhere after these electrical lightning storms. One of them's a big guy, and one of them's a normal-looking guy. Both of them get into trouble right away. The big guy has an altercation with some punks, one of them played by Bill Paxton. The big guy, he rips one guy's heart out and takes another guy's clothes. And the normal guy gets chased by cops, gets into a fight with them, and steals their guns. Both of these guys seek out phone books, and they look up the same name in the phone book, Sarah Connor. There are 3 Sarahs listed in the phone book. Then we meet our Sarah Connor. She's a waitress, not a very good one, it looks like. The first 2 Sarah Connors listed in the phone book are murdered. We see the big guy perform one of those murders, and our Sarah becomes aware of these murders and contacts the police, realizing that she might be next. Before the police can arrive to help her, the big guy tries to kill Sarah, while the normal guy saves her. They escape. The normal-looking guy's name is Kyle Reese. The big guy is a Terminator who's been sent to kill Sarah Connor. They're both from the future where there has been a nuclear war, and now the men are fighting the machines. The Terminator is a cyborg that's part machine with a layer of human covering on him. And Kyle Reese informs her that she is the mother of John Connor, who is a resistance fighter and a leader of the resistance. The Terminator finds them, and they have a big car chase. At the end of that chase, the cops catch up with them, and they take Sarah and Reese to the police station. Sarah tries to take a nap until the Terminator drives a car into the police station's lobby and then shoots a couple dozen cops. Sarah and Reese get away. They check into a motel. They make some pipe bombs, and then they make a baby. The Terminator finds them again, and the chase is on again. During this chase, Reese is kind of leaning out of a truck window and throwing these pipe bombs at the Terminator, who's on a motorcycle. Reese gets shot during this chase. Reese manages to put a bomb into the big rig that the Terminator is driving. which explodes in a huge fireball. The force of the explosion and the resulting fire removes all of the human coverings from the cyborg, and he's now just a metal skeleton. This metal skeleton chases Sarah and Reese into a factory full of machinery. Reese plants a bomb right in the Terminator's torso, which explodes and rips it apart, mostly. But it keeps coming. Now it's dragging itself along the ground using its arm. The bomb, unfortunately, killed Kyle Reese, so now Sarah is left on her own. Sarah, who's also injured, is crawling through the factory and manages to pull herself through a giant metal press of some kind. The Terminator follows her through there. When she gets to the other side, she pushes the button. The press crushes the Terminator, crushes its skull. His lights go out, and that's the end of the Terminator. And then there's kind of an epilogue where, surprise, Sarah is pregnant with Kyle Reese's baby, and it turns out Kyle Reese is the father of John Connor. The end.
That's pretty much how it shook out.
Before we discuss the technology in the Terminator, Matt, what do you think of this movie?
I really like it. Clearly I've seen it a lot when I was younger, and I liked it back then. But I feel like it largely holds up. I mean, it's very much of the time, just with some of the visual effects and all that kind of stuff, and a pretty young Arnold Schwarzenegger. But when I was watching it, my wife mentioned this too. It's a really well-paced suspense type of movie. Like, even though I've seen it so many times, I know exactly what happens. I know every scene that's coming up and the order it comes in. When she's like trying to lure him through that press at the end, you're like, oh, she's not going to make it. Like, hurry up. It's still it frazzles you when you watch it still, So it's really enjoyable, even though it front to back. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Big thumbs up for me. I still like it.
Yep, thumbs up for me too. I like it. One of the scenes that I like a lot is there's a point where Sarah Connor knows that she's being hunted. She notices Kyle Reese following her down the street. She ducks into this club.
Yep.
Club is called Tech Noir, which is a great name for a club, by the way.
Yep. Especially in 1984. That was very clever.
Yep. At this point, we know that both the Terminator and Kyle Reese are following her, but we don't know their intentions. We know that Arnold has been killing people. We see him kill, at least a couple of people. He kills the guy at the gun shop, and then he kills the first Sarah Connor.
Yeah.
But we don't know what Kyle Reese has been doing. We've seen him get into a fight with cops and steal some guns and have flashbacks to the future. Can you flash back to the future? How does that work?
I think that's a different movie, but yeah, you can do that.
But the second Sarah Connor was killed, and we didn't see it on screen, so we don't know for sure if the Terminator did it or if Kyle Reese did it. So there's a little bit of uncertainty there. And it all comes together in this club where she's hiding out. Both of them know she's there. The Terminator shows up and is getting ready to shoot her when Kyle Reese jumps in and, shoots him with a shotgun, saves the day. One of the things I really like about this scene is there's a shot where Sarah Connor's sitting at a table and she knocks something off the table and she leans down to pick it up. And right at that moment, this is all shot in kind of slow-mo. Right at that moment, you see the Terminator kind of emerge from the crowd and he's scanning, looking around for her. And she is ducked down far enough that she's out of frame of the shot. So, we just assume that he can't see her because we can't see her. But it's a great shot. He's scanning the area where she's sitting right when she goes down, and then he moves along and she sits back up. And it's the kind of thing that you've seen 100 times. The whole like, oh, you just missed it. You looked right at the wrong time. But it's really well done the way the shot is composed and the timing of it and the slow-mo. I think it's really good.
Yeah, it was just really, that's kind of how the Terminator was moving through the place already in the first place. And so it did feel very just natural, It's because like he's this big, huge guy who didn't pay to get in, by the way. And so people were some people were kind of noticing him, but a lot of people weren't. So it was kind of weird that this huge guy that probably outweighs everybody in this club and has this Bill Paxton poser punk outfit on when everyone else is dressed in New Wave, but somehow he's incognito blending in with everything. And I don't know. It was so absurd that it worked for me. I don't know why, but it was just when you think about it, it's really funny because like a guy looking like that in a club like that would just be like everyone would just clear out of there just because of the way he looked, you know. But he's just like sneaking through. Everyone's just dancing, you know.
Yep,
If it was really like the '80s, then maybe it was implied that everyone was on coke and didn't know what was going on anyway. But
that's my assumption.
I think they had just the pacing of the time between he entered the club and when he got over there. You know, it wasn't too long, it wasn't too short, and it all just kind of worked. And then you just knew that hell was about to break loose.
And that being one of my favorite shots in the movie is followed up by one of my least favorite shots, which is it's not too long after that, he does spot her and he kind of walks right over to her. He pulls out his handgun with the laser sight on it. He's got the laser sight pointed at her forehead. The shot of the laser sight hitting her forehead while she's looking right at him, I don't like. And the reason why is because she just sits there and looks at him. This is someone who knows she's being hunted. She's hiding out in a club because she thought someone was following her. She's on high alert, right?
Mm-hmm.
But here's a man standing right in front of her holding a gun to her head and she just looks at him like she doesn't make a move. She doesn't even have a facial reaction really. She just kind of just sitting there. And I don't like that shot at all.
It didn't bother me so much. I thought she was just, kind of meek and scared, and she was expecting Kyle to be the one that was going to come in and kill her, right? So maybe she was just freaked out because it wasn't him. She's like, who the hell is this guy? I was expecting the skinny guy that's been skulking behind me all this time.
Right.
So I don't know.
Yeah,
I
maybe.
thought she was petrified on the inside, but yeah, I didn't even really notice that.
This scene also has the classic line, "Come with me if you want to live," that Kyle Reese says to Sarah as he's saving her. And of course is repeated in Terminator 2 when Arnold says it.
I had forgotten that it was in the original. When he said that, it sounded fake. It didn't sound right because it wasn't Arnold saying it. And
Right.
I'm just like, oh, I didn't remember that it was in parts one and two. So that was pretty funny.
Yeah. There's a couple other things around this scene that I like too, that good use of foreshadowing, I think. One of them is you already mentioned Arnold didn't pay to come into the club. And so backing up a little bit, when Sarah Connor first goes into the club, she tries to walk right in too.
Right.
And they stop her and say, no, you've got to pay. She pays and then she goes in. Arnold, they try and stop him and he doesn't pay and instead like breaks the guy's hand who puts his hand on his shoulder to try and stop him. But just, it's just those little touches, that little foreshadowing touch I like in a movie like this, kind of a low budget movie by a first time director. It's good stuff.
I agree.
Another example is it's not in this scene exactly, but it's happening around the same time, which is while she's hiding out in the club, Arnold goes to her apartment and ends up killing her roommate and her roommate's boyfriend. But the roommate is still alive and she's crawling on the floor away from him, which is a very similar thing to what we see at the end when Sarah Connor is crawling on the floor to try and get away from him.
Right. It's just she didn't have a big squisher in her apartment, unfortunately. So
Yeah, that's too bad.
that's too bad.
She did have her boyfriend, though, who I thought put up a pretty good fight, actually.
He did. Even if Arnold wasn't a cyborg and he was just a regular dude, that's some guts there, to try
Yeah.
to hit him with a lamp, you know.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the Terminator throws this guy through a sliding glass door, then throws him against a wall and breaks a mirror, then throws him onto the dresser, and then throws him through the bedroom door. And, the guy keeps getting up to go after him.
Yeah, it makes you wonder now that I think about it, why didn't he just shoot him like he shot everybody else? He like the first Sarah Connor, he didn't even like are you Sarah Connor? Boom, dead like immediately. you know,
Right.
he was trigger happy for everybody else, but for some reason not him. But
Arnold's performance is pretty good. I mean, it's classic at this point. Him
yeah,
as the Terminator it's a signature role. He doesn't speak very much. By my count, he has 16 lines.
sounds about
And
right.
yep, and how many of those have you used in conversation
Well, I was using "fuck you, asshole" before Terminator came out, so I don't know if that counts. But
Hmm.
um, perhaps I've been using a different inflection, since 1984. But yeah, you have to think if it was another actor that wasn't Arnold and didn't have his voice, would we even be talking about those lines today?
I don't know. Like if
I don't
Chevy
know.
Chase was in this role, you mean?
Yeah, maybe we would if it was him, but like, just one of all those regular actors. Like, I can't imagine any of them. Bruce Willis, "I'll be back." We wouldn't notice. It probably wouldn't be considered an iconic role for him, or
Yeah.
someone like that. But I mean,
No.
just because it was Arnold, and is
Yeah.
somehow it all works.
Yeah. It's a great job casting, obviously.
Yeah,
And James Cameron, he worked with Arnold a number of times. James Cameron is actually pretty loyal to his actors. Bill Paxton is in this movie in the beginning. He plays one of the punks that kind of gets beat up
yeah.
by Arnold.
The tire tracks on his face.
Yep, that's right. But yeah, I mean, Cameron worked with Arnold for Terminator 1 and 2 and True Lies. I like all those movies, by the way.
Yeah.
Bill Paxton worked with Cameron on Terminator and Aliens and True Lies and Titanic. But even Michael Biehn, who plays Kyle Reese, he was in Terminator and Aliens and The Abyss. And Lance Henriksen, who's in the Terminator, he plays one of the cops. He was before Terminator, he was in Piranha Part 2 that James Cameron worked on, and he was in Aliens. Of course, Linda Hamilton was in Terminator and Terminator 2, and then became James Cameron's wife.
For a little while.
The interesting thing is, none of those actors were in Avatar. So after being so loyal to these
They're
guys,
getting too old by then.
yeah, I guess so. I mean, he stuck with Sigourney Weaver, who was in Aliens, but she
Yeah, that's
wasn't
true.
in the Terminator or Piranha Part 2. So,
Yeah.
all right,
Um,
I kind of have a list of things that I like about this movie, just little things.
mhm.
One of them is the practical effects
Yeah.
and the what's credited as the special Terminator effects by Stan Winston.
I thought those were awesome.
Yeah.
It's been, a while since I've seen it. And, at the beginning, they had his name, Stan Winston, pretty prominent. And I'm like, oh, I don't even remember what he did. But then when it happens, it's pretty obvious, but it's still just awesome to see. You can't not think of Jason and the Argonauts when you see just the way that thing moves and all that stuff. And I thought that was one of my favorite parts toward the end. When they have the full-bodied Terminator, walking around there. I thought that was so cool.
Yeah.
They did such a good job on that.
Yep. Another thing I liked is there's a point where Kyle Reese is being chased by the police and he escapes into a store where he gets some clothes. He gets a coat and some shoes. The shoes that he grabs are these black Nike high tops
Those were pretty sweet.
with Velcro strap at the top. Those things are sweet.
Yeah, totally 80s.
Hmm.
One of the things, speaking about practical effects and stuff, one of my favorite scenes was that car chase near the beginning where they have that first car and then they pull into the parking garage and they get the second car and
Hmm.
then Arnold pulls up in his police cruiser and there's this shot where they're speeding through the parking structure, hanging out the window shooting shotguns at each other, and that had to be done for real. And
Right.
I couldn't imagine that stunt, men, whatever, would like even try to do that these days. Because it's like a single wide shot with both cars in it at the same time. It's probably went on not as long as it seemed like it did, but even for like 10 seconds, hanging out the window and doing that, that's like crazy. You can really get hurt doing that. but it looks so, but it looks so cool. I was like,
Wait a
God,
minute.
that is just nuts.
Are you telling me that stunt work is dangerous?
It's totally dangerous,
Oh my
especially when you're
God.
you're hanging out of a car window shooting, with a couple
Yeah.
of shotguns. I mean that had to be acted out and timed and done correctly, and at the right speed, and all the camera had to go along probably in another car or something. And just
Right.
it boggles the mind that they could put something together like that. I thought it was so cool. And then that was just the beginning of the chase, and then it just goes out the garage and continues on. And that was one of my favorite parts of the movie. Was that was really, they had a little bit of a chase going in there, to start, but not a really big one. It was just kind of skidding around and stuff. But I think that really just kind of opened up the action of the movie and just kind of like hit you over the head, and then you're like, oh, okay, this is the kind of movie this is going to be. So I thought that car chase was probably one of my favorite parts of the movie right there.
Yeah. There's a making of on YouTube that you can watch where they show how they do the scene where Arnold is on the hood of the car and he punches through the windshield.
Oh yeah.
They show how they shot that. And obviously it's not Arnold's arm that's punching through the windshield.
Mm-hmm.
They created a steel, a fake hand slash arm out of steel with like a hydraulic behind it.
All right.
And so he had to time his movement with the, forward punch of the hydraulic arm. And then also they had a big semi truck with a facade of brick along the side of it. They would drive past them at the same time so that it looks like the car he's on is moving.
Mm.
But the car is stationary. The
Right.
semi truck drives by, so it looks like the car is moving. They trigger the hydraulic at the same time. Arnold kind of pivots his body to punch through the window. And it's just one of those things, right? Like you were just saying, it's all about timing and ingenuity and, capturing it in camera and figuring out a way to make that work. It's not that it's better or worse. It's just that it's really interesting to see how they did these things.
Yeah, I agree. I would say that if you look at the modern Mad Max from last year, year before,
Yep.
that they did a lot of that type of stuff for that movie, but like in between then and the late '80s, early '90s, just it was few and far between. Where you would have to build some apparatus like that and then put a person on it,
Hmm.
so it looks real, you know.
Right. Another thing I like about this movie is the music. It's really good.
It's really good, and it's I forgot kind of how iconic it is, especially like the Terminator's little theme. I'm not even sure you would
Hmm.
call it a theme. It's just the noise that happens when he's near. I kind of forgot about that. I'm like, oh, that is really it's nerve wracking. Like it works so well. It's like,
Right.
yeah, and it's very much just the rest of the soundtrack and the score and everything is very much at the time. It's totally dated, but it really works for the movie. I think it's really good.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. I liked it a lot. Even they play the main theme over the opening credits. And even then I
Yeah,
was like, oh yeah, the music. It's great.
yeah,
I'm wondering if this movie has a message. And I think it does. Kyle Reese has memorized a message that John Connor wanted him to take to Sarah Connor.
hmm
And the message was, I can't help you with what you must soon face, except to say that the future is not set. You must be stronger than you imagine you can be. You must survive, or I will never exist. So it's the part about the future is not set. That's clearly the message here,
yeah.
right? Like free will and all that kind of business.
Right. The Kyle Reese character alluded to that very briefly at one point. It must have been when he first met Sarah and they got in the car and she says, "You're from the future," and he said, "One possible future," or something
Right.
along those lines. So they kind of like,
Yep.
even at the very beginning, they were hinting at that, in a very subtle way.
Yep. And I want to come back to that in a minute. You ready to talk about the technology?
Sure.
Because I want to talk
Whatever.
about that some more, but it comes in the technology section.
Okie doke. All right.
Anyway, yeah. Did you have anything else though for the non-technology part?
Are we going to do a section on what bothered me?
If you want to, sure.
I've just got one really dumb anecdote that I just thought was hilarious for some reason. I don't know why. When they were in the hotel room and they were first building the pipe bombs, and she's put the cap on the end, and she like bangs it on the table, and he's like, "No, be careful, don't do that, be gentle." And then like not even 2 minutes later, they have him in the backpack, and she's like pretending to throw it at him, and he's like swinging around, and like they hit the table with it or something. And I'm just like, oh,
Yeah.
dude, what are you doing? Like so for the rest of the time, they're treating him like, bottles of water or something, like nothing. But it was just so funny that they're just like, hucking it into the back of the truck that they steal and stuff. So
Yeah, yeah.
it just cracked me up. That, like 2 seconds later, they just throw that out the window. But it was just funny.
That's funny. So let's talk about the technology on display here.
Yes,
The first thing I think is the Terminator himself.
yes,
Kyle Reese gives us some information about him, says that the Terminator is a cyborg and calls him an infiltration unit who is part man and part machine. Underneath, he's got a hyperalloy combat chassis. He's microprocessor controlled. He's fully armored, and his outside is living tissue, which is grown for the cyborgs. So he's mostly machine, but he looks human and he's got flesh and blood and hair. What I'm mostly interested, I think, is his programming as a machine. So the first thing is he doesn't know what Sarah looks like. And I'm curious about why nobody fed him some photographs of Sarah Connor. Now, there is a photograph in the movie that shows up a couple of times.
yeah,
We see Kyle Reese has it when he's in his war zone in the future. And then at the end of the movie, we see when that photo is taken as Sarah Connor is traveling through Mexico. Taking this movie on its own, it's probably fine. But what I can't get past is knowing what happens in Terminator 2 and knowing that there would be all kinds of computer records of what she looks like. And those computer records would have been accessible to Skynet. And so they would have known what she looks like. And they would have fed that to him if they wanted to send him back in time to kill her.
but that's only in that particular future. The theme was that the future isn't set.
Well,
So even though the future plays out largely the way that it was supposed to, there could be subtle differences between what happened, the first time where Kyle Reese came back and the intervening years to get back to that point.
we'll get to that in a minute
Okay.
because I have something
You have
else
a,
to say about
you have
that.
opinions on that. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, just in terms of his programming, he's supposed to be, he's an AI, obviously. I assume that means he's some sort of machine learned construct,
Yeah.
apparatus. I don't know what I'm trying to say there.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering what kind of training data they would have fed him if if he's learning and he doesn't know what she looks like, but he is programmed to kill. So when they show a Terminator in the future and he just indiscriminately kills, right? He goes into their foxhole or wherever everybody's hiding out and just shoots up the whole place, kills everybody.
Right.
And we see the Arnold Schwarzenegger Terminator do some of that. When he goes into the police station, for example, he just shoots everybody.
Right.
But most of the time, he's actually just trying to find Sarah. When he's in the club, for example, he's not shooting up the whole club. He's just trying to find Sarah.
Right.
So he's got some sort of programming that allows him to discriminate against who to kill and who not to kill. And another indication is, like you said, when he goes to that first Sarah Connor and asks her, he says, Sarah Connor, she says yes. He actually waits for confirmation that it's her before killing her.
Mm-hmm.
But then when he goes to Sarah Connor's apartment and he kills the roommate, he doesn't ask her if she's Sarah Connor. He just kills her. And in between those two kills, I'm wondering what happened that would have changed his algorithm. Like, what did he learn in between those two incidents that made him not ask anymore and just, kill the roommate?
If I had to speculate, I thought about this too, a little bit, but not exactly from that angle. At that point, he's already killed 2 out of the 3. He's only got 1 left. So he doesn't care about being subtle anymore, right? If he would have, let's say the first Sarah Connor was at a grocery store and he killed everybody in the grocery store, he's still got 2 more Sarahs to get through, and he's drawn all this attention to himself. So I think through the first one, he doesn't want to be exposed necessarily. He wants to get away with it like a regular old crime, I guess. They didn't show us how the second one went down, but at that point, he's only got 1 more objective left to kill the last remaining Sarah Connor. At that point, it's not clear that he knows which Sarah Connor is the one that he needs to kill anyway.
Right.
He knows he's got to kill all three of them, and it just happened that the third Sarah Connor was third in alphabetical order in the phone book. But either way, he from the very beginning he knows, okay, I got three of them to kill, and two of them are gone. So who cares now? I can kill 30 police officers as long as I get that last Sarah. It doesn't matter what happens to me. So maybe he has that kind of logic in him, and
Hmm.
was just trying to be as under the radar as he could for the first two, and then just busts out for the third one.
Hmm. He's got some other impressive programming too. He's able to repair himself,
Yep.
for example. He's able to impersonate voices, which comes in handy. What else can he do? He's a crack shot, obviously.
He's a crack shot. He has a encyclopedic knowledge of firearms in 1984,
Yep.
and how to use them and how to reload them quickly.
Yep.
He knows how to hotwire a car and drive a car at all, actually.
Right.
But the Terminators aren't drivers; they're hunters. So that is something that is probably unique to him. They probably had to teach him all kinds of stuff before they sent him back,
Right. Yeah.
because they don't have, a 68 Plymouth station wagon in 2028 or whatever it was.
As far as you know, they didn't.
As far as I know, it didn't look like they had a road to drive them on anyway. So even if they had them, he wouldn't
Yeah.
be able to get very far. So, and
Yeah.
he,
The roads
yeah,
look a little blocked in the future.
yeah, they're filled with weird debris.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he knew all kinds of stuff.
Oh, and I have a question for you.
Yes.
Do you think Jeff Goldblum could upload a virus into it?
Oh my. That would be really tough, just because he kills and shoots everything that's within 20 yards of him. So
Hmm.
getting past that would be difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah, and probably not when he had his skin on, because where's the port? How do you get in there?
Well, he's got to be wireless, right? They don't use ports
Yeah,
in the future.
I guess so. But in 1984, he would have had to use 84 technology to get in there.
Well, not
So
Jeff Goldblum. He would have,
yeah, oh yeah,
he would have figured something out.
yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, but the difference when we're comparing to Independence Day is that they didn't have a Terminator to study for 40 years first.
Right. Yep.
That would be a tough call. I think he could do it in 40 years, but
I'd like to talk about the time travel mechanism on display in this movie.
okay.
I think the time travel mechanism is at odds with the movie's message. So, if the movie's message is that the future is not set, I don't think the way time travel works in the movie supports that. Here's why. Because there's no version of 1984 that can exist where these events don't happen. This stuff has to happen. Kyle Reese has to travel back in time and impregnate Sarah Connor, or else John Connor's never born, and then there's nobody to send Kyle Reese back in time. So that has to happen in every version of 1984.
Let me toss around a different ball into this conversation
Okay.
around that, because my wife had a similar beef with the movie, and I contend that the father of John Connor didn't necessarily have to be Kyle Reese. It could have been anybody. But he was there. He knew that she had to get pregnant, and he specifically says to her that John Connor becomes who he is because of you, because of Sarah, because of how you train him, and because of what you make him into. It,
He
it
does
didn't
say
have
that.
it didn't have anything to do, according to him, to genes or who his father was or anything like that. So the quote unquote first time through, anyone could have got her pregnant. At that point, maybe he's thinking, maybe I don't kill the Terminator, and she's got to be running from him forever. I just got to get this seed in there and put those wheels in motion. And he just, that was his last ditch effort to make sure that that happened, instead of going, okay, Terminator's going to kill me, Sarah, make sure you get pregnant. He just took care of it himself because he was there.
Well, let me ask you this. Why would she have trained John Connor as a boy if she didn't know what was coming in the future? Because at the end, they have her making those tapes, right? She's
Yeah,
talking into the tapes and she's saying, I'm going to tell you all these things. And there's that comment at the end where the kid says a storm is coming and she says, I know. And that seems to be the whole impetus for her training John Connor to be ready for what's coming.
right.
If Kyle Reese never travels back in time, she doesn't know any of that.
That's true. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good point.
I win.
Yeah, you win. But they don't really tell it about that because then you get into the problem of this infinite time travel loop.
Hmm.
What came first, the Kyle Reese or the John Connor?
Well, but that's why I think it's at odds with what the movie tells us,
Right,
that the future is not set. I think the future is absolutely set. This has to happen. So the first time through 1984, Kyle Reese has to show up. It's not like it's the second time through. It happens every time. The first time, well, there's only one time. There's only one timeline here.
right.
That's the way I would read it.
Yeah.
If you look at a movie like Back to the Future and how time travel works in that movie, where you do see the original timeline and then you see somebody go and change it and then you see the new timeline, that's a movie that is clearly telling you how their time travel mechanism works and that there are definitely multiple timelines because we see them.
Right. Well,
Where Terminator doesn't do that. It just shows us the one timeline.
right. Yeah, true. In fact, I think in the second one, he draws it out on a chalkboard, if I
That's
remember
right.
correctly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's another trilogy that I watch often.
So about the time travel itself, they don't talk too much about it. We're inferring what we're inferring based on what the movie tells us, but
Right.
the movie doesn't really explain the time travel mechanism.
It was very dismissive, which I thought was kind of funny, actually.
Yeah. Kyle Reese actually says at one point, I don't know tech stuff.
He's like, I don't know. They had a machine. They destroyed it right after they sent me through. It's just me and him. Yeah, that's it.
Yep. And he knows he can't go back. That's about all he knows.
Yeah. I can't go back and no one else is coming through. That was it. That's all he knew.
Yep. And you have to be naked for it to work. Yep.
Another thing that just was hilarious to me for some reason was, when Arnold comes through, he's, in his superhero crouch and he's all grand. And then when Kyle comes through, he drops like 6 feet onto the ground. Just like,
Yeah. He kind of flops like a fish onto the ground.
that cracked me up for no particular
Poor
reason.
Kyle.
Poor Kyle. Exactly.
They show the future in a few scenes. Los Angeles in 2029.
Yeah, the laser tag, Los
Yep.
Angeles.
Yep. The war looks like it's been sponsored by a Las Vegas casino.
Yeah, I
It's a
think
big laser show.
I saw Truckosaurus back there. I think.
Yeah, exactly. The movie tells us that the machines and the humans are at war. And so Los Angeles in 2029 just looks like a fallout zone. There's debris all over the place, like fallen buildings, and, it just looks like a giant junkyard, essentially. There's a scene where they show everybody kind of lives underground. They're all sick and sad and
Right.
dying. They're catching rats, I think, for food,
Yep.
presumably. They show two girls watching a TV.
It just has fire inside of it.
Yeah.
That was
Yep.
pretty great.
Yep. So really bleak future, obviously. You can see why, well, actually, I was about to say you can see why they'd want to avoid it, but that's not actually what they're doing. They're not trying to avoid it. They're trying to get through it.
Right. I think that's a question that comes up in the second Terminator. Why don't they just go stop Cyberdyne? Why don't they just go there now and tell them to be careful about what you're doing? Instead of going through this whole rigmarole of making sure that John gets born and raised right and then turns into this big fighter. It's kind of like, would you go back in time and kill Hitler thing?
Right.
It's like, yeah, of course you would. You wouldn't go back in time and then just warn everybody, hey, look, there's going to be this big war. So start training, start making guns,
Yeah, get ready.
make sure you have enough tanks. That's
Yep.
kind of like what they were saying. But
Start manufacturing steel right now.
exactly.
Right. Yeah, interesting. But yeah, you're right. They do kind of address that in the next one. which we'll have to do at some point.
Yeah, definitely. We already talked a little bit about the AI and the skill set and all that stuff. And as I was watching this and putting myself in, 1984, it was probably pretty far fetched that a robot can, recognize a person, and shoot them, or, hear a dog that's barking too much at them and kill that. But the more I thought about it, and I'm an AI skeptic. I don't believe that much in AI and that it's going to, be this thing within my lifetime. But like a lot of the things that the T2 does or was supposed to do, I mean, essentially, he's got to walk around and kill people. And we have robots that can kind of do that now. And, in another, was it 2029 when
Yeah.
when it was, in another 12 years, aside from some of the improvisational things that he did, I'm kind of buying it that you can build a robot that can recognize a human face and kill them. I don't know, or even, read a phone book and find a name and navigate. Like we have, we hold supercomputers in our hands that can navigate now.
Right.
So it doesn't seem as far fetched as it did in 1984. We got robots that can climb upstairs and jump really high and walk on 2 feet and outrun humans and all that kind of stuff. But it just seems like technology has accelerated so much in the last decade and a half or so that it doesn't seem as ridiculous.
Yeah, it's all plausible. There's nothing in here that makes me think, well, that's just,
Yeah,
ludicrous.
that's just stupid.
Yeah.
And I think I saw some assembler on his heads-up display, which was interesting
Oh, yeah.
because why would he need to see that? But it's just that was just the shorthand for this is a technological thing in 1984. So it's just like,
Yeah, he was debugging code while he walks around,
yeah,
no big deal.
he got hit in the hip and he was limping a little, so he had to compensate with the right servo in his hip to
Yeah.
to walk straight.
When this movie came out in 1984, at the box office, it made 38 million bucks, and its budget was 6.5 million.
That's a lot of money in 1984 dollars.
Yeah, that's good money. In 1984, the number one movie of the year was Beverly Hills Cop,
Ooh,
which made 234 million. That's a ton of money in 1984.
that's a ton of money, but Eddie Murphy probably was paid more than the budget of Terminator just himself for that at that point.
Yeah, he might have been. The rest of the top five box office that year, you've got Ghostbusters at 229 million, Temple of Doom at 179 million, Gremlins at 148 million, and Karate Kid at 90 million.
Ah,
Which, top five grossing films from 1984, that list is a lot different than top five grossing films nowadays.
yeah,
Each of these movies made its way to the top of that list based on everybody loved those movies.
yeah. There is a point in there though, um, and that it's at that time James Cameron, who's he? Arnold Schwarzenegger. Oh, I think I've seen him in that other movie, Linda Hamilton. All these guys weren't big name known people.
Right.
It's you can almost think of it as like some indie flick, even though it had with MGM behind it. But I mean, there was nothing to sell this movie on except for the movie itself.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
interesting that it was able to do that.
The critics like this movie. You look it up on Rotten Tomatoes, it has a 100% critic score,
That's
and
pretty good, I think.
I think so, and an 89% audience score. I watched the Siskel and Ebert review for the Terminator. Something that was interesting about that is they reviewed it after it had been out in theaters for a couple of weeks already.
Hmm.
I always think of Siskel and Ebert as doing the new releases, but this was one that snuck up on people, right? Because like you said, who's James Cameron? What is this movie, The Terminator? It wasn't a big deal until it got to the theaters and people started liking it.
Right.
So, how do you think Siskel felt about this movie?
Oh, he probably thought it was stupid.
Yeah,
He probably didn't like it at all.
he didn't give it a thumb up or down, but the way he talked about it was a thumbs down.
Yeah.
He said it's not a very well made action picture and it should have focused on the love story.
Just as a total side note, I was born in Chicago and I lived in Chicago in
Hmm.
the outskirts all growing up. And, my parents took us to a lot of movies when we were kids. Never on the weekend they came out, unfortunately. So you can imagine there were some movies that were ruined for me. But, I saw a lot of movies and Siskel and Ebert, like even when they were basically on a local channel, not quite public access, but not a major network, and it was always on in our house. So I can remember being very young and seeing them. And Siskel was always the guy that, like, I hate him and I love him at the same time, just because he says stuff like that.
Hmm.
In retrospect, having the last 24, 30 years of Terminator, and then hearing that, I'm like, oh my God, that's typical Siskel. Of course he said that. But then it's hilarious. You got to like admire a guy that watches the Terminator and doesn't like it because the love story wasn't in there enough. It's just like,
Right.
oh man, it just cracks me up.
Roger Ebert did give it a thumbs up.
Yeah.
He said he appreciated both the action and the love story.
Hmm.
And he described it as a cross of Dirty Harry, Road Warrior, and the killer from Halloween.
Yeah, that sounds. Yeah, that's about right.
I think the Terminator's legacy is secure. I mean, it spawned a franchise. There's 5 movies now. There was a TV show,
Yep.
comic books based off of this world. The U.S. Library of Congress selected it for inclusion in the National Film Registry. I understand there are more movies coming, reportedly with James Cameron's involvement as maybe a producer.
Hmm.
So that'll be interesting.
It will be interesting.
Okay. You have any final thoughts on the Terminator?
No. Yeah, I think that's it.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone. If you like the show, you can leave us a rating or a review on Apple Podcasts. You can find the show on the World Wide Web at moviesunhacked.com. And
Do you have to say World Wide Web?
yes,
That sounds very anachronistic.
well, we're talking about 1984.
Oh, okay, I guess. Yeah, you can find it on Gopher, or
Yep, Movies Unhacked on Gopher or on Twitter, either one.
oh yeah, Twitter works.
Yep. You can send email to moviesunhacked@gmail.com. Matt, where can the people find you? And by people, I mean killer cyborgs from the future, of course.
Killer Cyborgs from the Future. Well, they can find me at my home, and I'm not going to give my address, but I am at the fake Matty J on Twitter.
Okay. Thanks, Matt. You're the best.
And 3, 2, 1.
Somehow that doesn't help. I don't know.
Should I do the signals?
No, that just reminds me of Wayne's World when you do
Uh-huh.
that. This is not working out at all for me.
You made such a big deal about me not reading that part of the email, and now you are utterly unprepared. That is just that is so professional.
Yeah. As usual, the outtakes are better than the show. It's fine.
Well, this show isn't in the can yet, so we don't know that for sure.
Okay.
Not for sure.
Sick, folks. Now I need another one, man.